السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه فهذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكناه أرضك طوعا وتمتع فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وأهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
رحمة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. Tonight I wanted to talk about the importance of establishing majalis, on why we come and why we establish majalis for all of the imams or for during Muharram or all of the time. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. There's an ayah in the Quran in Surah Yusuf where it's talking about Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam, and it's ayah 84. He says, and he turned away from them and said, "Oh my sorrow over Yusuf," and his eyes became white from grief. So we see that Yaqub alayhi salam, he cried over Yusuf until his eyes became blind of crying over Yusuf. And he knew that Yusuf wasn't even passed on. It was just because of the separation of Yusuf. So how about the crying that we do and the remembrance that we do for the tragedy of Karbala, when we remember all of these events that happened? And this is also something that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam mentioned to someone. He said, how come Yaqub cried for Yusuf so much until he became blind and he didn't even pass, he wasn't passed away, but look at my father and what happened to him, and you tell me that I shouldn't cry. So some people say that we shouldn't cry loud, or we shouldn't do, they say crying loud or doing azah or things like this makes us look inhumane, or we should be more civilized and just cry in a low tone or things like this. But these things are opposite of what the Imams alayhi salam taught us. We see that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said he senses, he prays for those who cry in a loud voice. And I wanted to come tonight just to talk about the importance of establishing majalis and about why we come to do this. Why do we come commemorate the Imams? Or is it something new that happened later on after the tragedy of Karbala? Or is it something that actually the Imams instructed us to do? Because some people might come and say, oh, the Shia, they came and innovated something later, and they come and they mourn Imam Hussein, and no one told them to do this, and none of the Imams said to do this. But tonight, inshallah, we'll take a look a little bit more in depth. So the first narration I wanted to mention was from Imam Bakr alayhi salam. He said the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi,
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
He said the Prophet once gazed at Imam Hussein alayhi salam while he was in front of him, and he sat Imam Hussein on his lap, and he said, verily for the martyrdom of Imam Hussein there is a heat in the heart of the believers that will never be extinguished. And in another time, he also mentioned about Imam Hussein, he said, no believer remembers him except that he cries for him. So we see that this is not just something that it comes and goes. It's something that's continuous, that we always cry for Imam Hussein. We remember his tragedies and what befell him. So this is when we come establish Majlis. Every year we come to commemorate and to bring the stories of the lives of Ahlul-Bayt alayhimus salam and to remember what they stood for and what they sacrificed. Because if this was just a historical events come and go. Because you can ask many people here, or either in your own countries, when you study in school about the history of the country. Of what, let's say here in America, maybe in school, you study about the Civil War or one of the French Revolution or one of these wars. You might remember it right then, but over time you don't remember those things anymore. But tragedy of Karbala, every year, it's something that you never forget. Once you hear that story, it's something in your heart, like the Prophet said, you never forget what happened. It's always fresh in your mind. SubhanAllah. So these things, we come and we commemorate them. And we remember the philosophy behind Karbala, the goals, the circumstances, and we revive these things every year, and it brings to life the message of Imam Hussein in each one of our lives. And we remember everything that he stood for, and we relate the principles of what Imam Hussein alayhi salam stood for, and we try to apply his principles in his life and how he lived in our day-to-day lives. Inshallah, may Allah help us all with that. And another thing that we come to realize when we establish the Majalis, and we all come together, you see that it unites all of us Shia from all different countries, all different backgrounds, nationalities. We all come together, and we're all united by Imam Hussein and by Ahlul-Bayt alayhimus salam, by all of these Imams, because they're God's representatives on the earth, the Ma'sumeen alayhimus salam. They're our chosen, our guides, the 14 guides that Allah sent here for us. So no matter where we're from, we're all united under this banner of Ahlul-Bayt alayhimus salam. Sometimes people get a little bit sidetracked and get off in this. They get into, oh, I'm just going to be around my nationality, or I'm just going to be around for example, my Pakistani friends, or I'm just going to be around my Iranian friends, or Iraqi friends, or Afghani friends, whoever your nationality, and don't mix with each other. But this isn't the way that it's supposed to be. The Imams and these Majalis, they bring us all together and unite all of us, and we all commemorate the tragedy together and mourn Imam Hussein and the Imams on their respective days that they were martyred. We all come and remember them as one. And it's an important thing that we see from these Majalis. Also, we see that when we go through our tragedies in life, we have, something happened in our life, and we think, oh my God, it's the worst thing that ever happened to us, But in reality, it could have been you got a flat tire on your way to work, or maybe a young person, they didn't get into the college they wanted to, or they didn't get the proposal accepted from them for the girl they proposed to. And something didn't work out for them, and they think it's the worst thing that happened to them in their life. But when you think about, you always recall what happened on the day of Ashura, everything seems insignificant. Like nothing else matters. There's no way that anything that we go through can even compare to that. That's why they say that Imam Hassan alayhi salam said that there's no day like your day, Ya Abu Abdullah. So it would be a travesty to say that this is just a historical event that's in the past, and we don't bring it up except in classrooms and just talk about it in universities, and that's it. We should try to bring this message up as much as we can. It rekindles that light within our hearts, and it establishes the connection between us and the Imams. We should do Majalis in our house. It doesn't even have to be in a center. Sometimes there is no center nearby, but people, they come together. Instead of saying, okay, there's no center, we shouldn't do anything because center's 3 hours away and we can't drive there, so we're not going to do anything. Maybe there's a few people in your neighborhood that you can invite, or close by to you in the same situation. Or sometimes even your own family. You can just do majlis with your own family and commemorate the events of Karbala and remind and gain lessons from them and mourn together. So some of these reasons, these are just some of the reasons. There's many other reasons that could be brought forth, but we'll take a look at some of the narrations from Ahlul-Bayt alayhimussalam and see why they encourage such gatherings. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One unique thing that I saw when I was researching about this topic was that Imam Rida alayhi salam, salawat by his name, he even established people to do majlis for him while he was still alive. He knew that he was going to die when he was sent to Mashhad. So it's narrated from Imam Rida alayhi salam, when I received the orders to be extradited from Medina, I gathered my family and I asked them to mourn for me. And then I gave them 12,000 dinars and I spread them among them and said, I shall never return to my family again. And consequently, we see that we recited one of the ziyarat for Imam Rida alayhi salam. Peace be upon you, O one who asked his family to mourn him even before death reached him. So we see that Imam Rida alayhi salam established majlis for himself even before he passed away. He asked his family to mourn him. So this is one Imam. We also see that the Majalis goes back as far as Karbala, but even it goes back farther than that actually. If you go back to look in the Battle of Uhud with Hamza, Hamza, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. People were mourning all of their family members in the battle, after the Battle of Uhud, but he saw that no one was there to mourn for Hamza. So the Prophet gathered some people together and asked them to mourn for his uncle, for Hamza. So he even encouraged majlis and to mourn for Hamza. So this is also a prophetic tradition, not just something that came later on in life. If someone tries to say that it's something that we concocted or we innovated later on. So in Karbala, we see that it's narrated by Sayyid ibn Tawus. And when the women were returning back from Sham, from Iraq, they asked they were coming from Sham to Iraq. They asked the guide of the caravan to pass by Karbala. When they reached the battlefield, they saw Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari with a number of men from Bani Hashim by the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They were all mourning and lamenting Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and they were beating their chest in a heart-rending manner for a number of days. So they were all around the place where Imam Hussein died, and they were doing latam, and they were remembering Imam Hussein and remembering what just happened, and they were mourning him. And this happened in Karbala, and when the women arrived and they saw this. And also the women established their own separate majlis as well for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. And then we see that also al-Baneen established majlis as well. We did salawat for al-Baneen. So there's a book called al-Riyadh al-Ahsan. And it says, al-Baneen, the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, established a mourning ceremony in honor of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And the women of Bani Hashim all gathered together and they wept for the Imam. And Salama came and she was crying loud and she asked Allah, she said, may Allah chastise them with fire in their graves for their actions. And she condemned the killers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And the Imams alayhi salam, they did not only exhaust themselves in holding commemoration gatherings in honor of Imam Hussein, but they also encouraged others to do this as well. So they worked hard to establish the Majalis to remember Imam Hussein, and they also encouraged their Shia to do the same thing. So we have to ask us, what type of purpose does this Majalis hold? So we see the sacrifice that Ahlul-Bayt ﷺ they did, and how they gave everything to Allah. They gave everything for Allah. And we see how the ayah about Ibrahim ﷺ says, "My life and death are only for Allah." And we see this true with Imam Hussein. And there's a lot of correlation between the story of Ibrahim and also with Imam Hussein ﷺ, where he went to sacrifice Ismail, but it was ransomed. It says it was ransomed with a great sacrifice, and that great sacrifice we see from narrations was Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So this also, they gave everything they had for Islam. So we should also take lesson from that, and we should look at what are we doing to follow in Ahlul-Bayt in their footsteps, and what are we doing for Islam. We should look, every one of us should look at our own life and evaluate it and ask ourselves, what are we doing? Are we doing all that we could? What else can we do? If we're not doing anything, let's come up with a plan, an action plan to figure out what we can do to serve Imam Hussein and to serve the cause of Ahlul-Bayt, and brainstorm and draw some things on paper even, and come up with some things that you can do. Even contributing to Majlis by giving anything you can to a Majlis. It has such a high rank, I don't even know what I could say about it. No one even knows this status except Allah for this rank. So Imam Baqir alayhi salam, Imam Baqir alayhi salam says, "May the mercy of Allah descend upon the believer who meets with another and recalls our affairs. For verily the third one to be amongst them is an angel who seeks forgiveness for those two." So we see here that when the two people come together, the third person is the angel, and the angel is seeking forgiveness for those who establish and remember the affairs of Ahlul-Bayt alayhimu salam. So no two people gather to remember our affairs except that Allah flaunts them with the angels. He shows them off to the angels. Look at what a high status these people are. They're established in Majalis for Ahlul-Bayt alayhimu salam, or for Imam Hussein. Look what a high status these are. He's showing them off to the angels. SubhanAllah. Hence, the hadith continues, "Hence, if you all collectively meet, then remember and summon people to our affairs, for verily our legacy is brought to life through your gatherings and commemorations. And the finest of people after us are those who recall our affair and invite others to do the same." So we see that the Imam says the finest of people is those who call others and to remember the tragedies and remember the things that Ahlul-Bayt were afflicted with. So this is a high status to do these. And it's also narrated in 𝗙𝗢𝗧𝗎𝗓, which is a very good book. It has so many narrations about visiting the Imams or going for ziyarah and all types of things, the status of Majalis, and so many things in this book. It's also in English. If anyone wants it, I can give them PDF later if they reach out to me. So in this book, we see that Imam Baqir says, "One should eulogize and weep for Imam Hussein and enjoin his household to cry for him and commemorate the tribulations that befell him by displaying acts of anguish. When he meets others, they should greet each other with tears, condoling one another over the tragedy that befell Imam Hussein. If one does this, if one does all of this, then I shall be their guarantor and ensure he receives his rewards from Allah the Almighty." So we see that the Imam is saying that if you eulogize Imam Hussein and you ask others to cry for him and you make others cry for him and you establish gatherings to remember Imam Hussein, that Imam Baqir alayhi salam, he will make sure that he said, "I will make sure that you will get your reward with Allah. I will witness for you. I'm going to be the intercessor for you with Allah to make sure you get your reward." So it's really important that we try to establish Majlis, and I'm really happy that this center did this for Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, because I've traveled all throughout the States, mostly on the East Coast, and I've been overseas in different centers. And a lot of places, they only do the 10 or 13 nights from Muharram, but when the martyrdom of Imam Jawad comes, there's no one there, there's no program, no one comes, they don't even establish program, but we should commemorate all of the Imams, all of their martyrdoms. We should have some program. Even if it says here, even if just 2 people come, the third one is the angel that seeks forgiveness for them. So we should always try to make some program and try to be mindful of those dates on our calendars. Even we can set some alert. For example, most people have it through their email accounts and their calendars, and they schedule all of their business appointments. But if we could think this way and establish the majalis through our calendars, and it remind us, okay, on this day is the martyrdom of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. It would remind us, and it would bring us to that mood and recall, it would bring to our mind what the Imams went through. And even if there is no program near you, if you can't establish one and you try to establish one, we could do it in our house and get some book and read some story from the life of the Imam, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, and try to remember what the Imam went through and what his teachings were so we can benefit from his life. To continue on, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, he once asked one of his companions, do you all collectively meet and discuss our affairs? So he's asking one of his companions that came, do you do this? Do you get together and do you talk about our affairs and what happened with Ahlul-Bayt and what happened with us? So his companion replied in the affirmative, yes, we do this. So the Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, indeed, I approve of these gatherings. So that right there shows us that's the stamp of approval. Imam Sadiq says he approves of this. What more would we need? So Imam Sadiq says, revive and recall our affairs, for verily Allah has mercy upon those who do so. Certainly whoever participates in a gathering where our remembrance and affairs is evoked, his heart shall be alive on the day all hearts shall die, on the day of judgment. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In Uyun al-Akhbar al-Ridha alayhi salam, it's narrated that Imam Ridha said, on the day when the hearts will perish, the hearts of those who attend majalis in which our affairs are revived will not perish. So this shows us in the day of judgment, when maybe our deeds weren't that heavy, we didn't have as many good deeds, but maybe we established majalis, and that this is the day that this thing, we might have looked at it as small, we might have carried the water in from the car, from the trunk of the car, and brought the water into the center because someone had trouble bringing it, or we might have cleaned up after the center afterwards, or we might have emailed some people and told them to come to the center. Anything you do for majalis, these things will come to you on the day that you need it the most. So we should give great importance to these things. And it's narrated 𝗙𝗢𝗪𝗧𝗧 that he visited Imam Ridha alayhi salam during the first 10 days of Muharram. And he saw Imam Ridha seated with his companions around him, and he had sadness and distress on his face. And so we gain from this right here that we can see that during these times of Muharram, the Imams would think about all of the tragedies that befell their ancestors and their forefathers, and Imam Hussein in particular, and you'd see that they were distressed and they were upset and they were in a mood of sadness, like Sheikh was saying before. We're still mourning from Karbala now, and people mourn during Muharram and Safar, and it's a continuous thing that we always remember the Imam during these times. So this just shows the mood of the Imam in this. He wasn't, like laughing and joking and having a good time, and then, because the other days were gone by, he was remembering the Imam, and he had a sadness on his face during this time. And he greeted his companion, he greeted him, the Imam greeted him, said, welcome, O one who aids us and aids our cause through his speech and his action. And then he said to me, I would like for you to compose a eulogy in regards to Imam Hussein. For verily these are the days in which we, the Ahlul-Bayt ﷺ, were afflicted with deep grief and sorrow, while our enemies, especially Bani Umayyah, were overjoyed with glee and happiness. Whoever weeps or makes others weep by remembering our tribulations, even if it were one person, his reward is with Allah. Whoever sheds tears out of grief due to the tribulations that befell us through the hands of our enemies, Allah the Almighty will raise him on the day of judgment on our side with us. And whoever weeps out of grief for my grandfather, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Allah Almighty will forgive all of his sins. SubhanAllah. So this shows the importance, and this person was actually a radud, or a poet, or one that made others weep for Imam Hussein. And those who do that have such a high station, and they were really praised by Ahlul-Bayt. Those who came and made others mourn for Imam Hussein and made them cry. These people have a really high status with Allah, and it says that all of their sins are forgiven. Those who make others cry for Imam Hussein. And even this companion, I remember in another story that the Imam gave him his abba, that he prayed, I think it was 80 salah, or in the abba, if I'm not mistaken. He gave it to him, and he gave it to him as a gift for making the poetry for Imam Hussein. And it just shows that, you know, what a high status he had for making others cry. And then the Imam, he stood up after this and he set up a veil as a partition, allowing the women from his household to partake in the mourning as well. So the Imam encouraged the women to mourn as well and establish their gatherings as well to mourn Imam Hussein. And he made a partition so that they could partake in the mourning ceremonies as well. And the Imam said to the companion, eulogize Imam Hussein, for verily you are our helper and extoller, through whom we are recognized, so long as you are alive. Therefore, do not have any shortcoming in supporting us, and as long as you can. So Imam Rida is telling him, don't have any shortcoming in supporting the Ahlul-Bayt. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier. We have to look at our lives and what we're doing for Ahlul-Bayt and what we can do, and look at our talents and our abilities and see how we can use them to serve Ahlul-Bayt's cause, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the companion, so Imam Rida alayhi salam told him to make a line to commemorate Imam Hussein, and then he said, my eyes teared, and with great sorrow I recited the following eulogy. Had Fatima Zahra seen the crushed corpse of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and seen how he died thirsty beside the banks of the river of Farad, then she would have struck her face in grief and tears streaming down her cheeks. And in these majalis, a lot of miracles happen as well, all around the world. Certain things happen that no one can explain. And I brought one short story to talk about, inshallah, so we can see just one example. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So there was a youth, and he had severe eye problems. He had some eye injury. He was born with it, and he continued. He had the eye trouble since he was 6 years old. He had eye trouble, and it continued on. And it started. He just was having eye problems, and then it continued on until eventually he went completely blind. So during the first 10 days of Muharram, his uncle held a majlis to commemorate the tragedy of Imam Hussein. And since it was the summertime, they had a lot of cold drinks that they wanted to hand out for the people who came to attend the majalis as 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗪, to give to the guests the cold drinks. So the man asked his uncle, the blind man, he's older now, he asked his uncle, he said, let me serve the guest. I want to be the one to give the guest the refreshment. But his uncle, you know, he pointed out, he said, how are you going to do that? Because you've lost your eyesight completely. You're completely blind. How can you give the refreshments out? So he said, you know, don't, please just let me do it. Just give me an aid, and I'll bring an aid to help me. So he agreed to it, and he gave him the aid. He started passing out the drinks to all of the people who attended the majalis. And while he's serving the drinks, the speaker, he started reciting the musibah of Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this blind man, he's handing out the drinks, and he's starting to hear the musibah of Sayyida Zainab. And he's so affected by the tragedy of Sayyida Zainab and what's going on, what he's hearing, he fell almost unconscious, and he started crying and just crying uncontrollably for Sayyida Zainab. And he said while he was in this condition, there was a lady that came and passed her hands over his eyes and said, from now on you're fine, you don't have any more eye trouble. And he said after that, he couldn't believe it, and he opened his eyes and he saw everything clear. And he looked around the majlis, and he went running to his uncle. And the whole majlis just got up, and it was a big disturbance. They couldn't believe what just happened. And it was because, you know, these things that he did and he wanted to serve 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗪 alayhi salam. So just this small thing of handing out a refreshing drink, a cup of water or lemonade or whatever the drink was, just for this he got his eyesight back. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I got this story, I saw it was in a book called Amazing Stories, and there's many other stories in that book. It's by Ayatollah al-Shirazi. It's a very good book. I recommend people to read it if you can. I had this story as well, but the story didn't end here. He got his eyesight back, and then later on he became a scientist. He studied and became a scientist. So he's working on an experiment, and he said he didn't realize that the vessel or whatever the container beside him, he's working on an experiment here, and this thing, he didn't know what was in it, and it had something flammable in it. So this thing exploded, and it caught him on fire, and it burned him, you know, all over, from the head to toe. And he was in the hospital for several months from this. Later on in life, he was all burnt. And the doctors, you know, they came in and they said, we're so surprised that we have to ask you, like, why, how come you're burnt everywhere, but your eyes aren't affected at all? Your eyes are fine. Nothing with your eyes, there's no problem. But everything else, your face, your head, the rest of your body is all burnt but your eyes. And he replied that this is a gift from Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and a promise that as long as I live, my eyes will never be in pain. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم العادة ثانية.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So, Imam, we came here tonight to commemorate Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, Imam Sajjad, and he spent his days after Karbala living in Medina. And he was teaching others through his beautiful supplications that we find in Sahifa Sajjadiyah. But the enemies of Ahlul-Bayt alayhim salam, they couldn't tolerate Imam Sajjad living in peace. They couldn't tolerate him living a peaceful life in Medina. So they saw the Imam as a threat to their power. The Imam would always make gatherings for people to come and remember what they did to his father, Abu Abdullah. And this was a constant thorn in the side of the rulers of the time. So the cursed Walid ibn Abdul Malik, lanatullah alayh, he plotted to poison the Imam. And he said, and he couldn't rest as long as Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, he couldn't rest as long as the Imam was alive. He gave him some poison mixed in a drink, and he ordered the Imam to drink it. And the Imam, he became very ill from this drink, and he suffered severe pain, and it caused him to come in and out of consciousness. And on a night tonight, like tonight, we can just recall, I want us to recall and think about the state that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, the state that the Imam was in when he drank this poison, and he was fading in and out of this consciousness. He was fading in and out, and I could only think, when I was thinking about this, about what the Imam might have been thinking about in his last moments when this poison was taking over his body. I was thinking that perhaps Imam Sajjad, perhaps he was thinking about how he was ill another time before when he was in the plains of Karbala, looking over the desert that was covered with the bodies of his family members. When he was looking out, when he was sick this other time, when he was surrounded by the cries of the mourning widows and the orphans of Ali Muhammad, wa Husayna. Perhaps he was thinking about when Umar ibn Sa'ad walked over with his soldiers and ordered the women and the children to be tied with ropes as captives. They're all crying as the Imam himself is put under heavy chains. Or maybe he was thinking when it was Yazid's soldiers spent the day burying their dead. But who was there to bury the bodies of the grandson of the Prophet of Islam and the other martyrs? Or was he thinking of when he suffered the discomfort on the journey to Kufa or Sham, when he was shackled with the heavy chains which bruised his wrists and they bruised his ankles, and he had a metal collar around his neck that would eat into the flesh of his neck? We just think about the tragedies that Imam Zainul Abidin went through. Or maybe he was thinking about when the enemy made them ride those unsaddled camels and would whip the Imam and the women and the children. Sometimes he would faint due to the extreme conditions he faced, and Yazid's soldiers would whip him almost to the point of death. Ya Imam, Allahu Akbar. Or he was recalling when he saw the head of his father placed on a spear, the same head that Rasulullah used to kiss, Ya Hussein. Or when he remembered the way that Imam Hussein's body was trampled until all of his bones were broken to pieces. Or maybe he was thinking when they set the tents on fire, or saw the women and the children running frantically from one tent to the other, when they snatched the veils from all of the women. See how they treat the daughters of Rasulullah. No one wanted to see a child hurting. No one wants to see their own child hurting, even the smallest bit of discomfort. But look how they snatched the earrings from the ears of Sakina, causing her ears to bleed. Humayd ibn Muslim narrates that when he saw a young girl running with her dress on fire and her ears bleeding, he ran after her and he wiped the blood away, and Sakina asked him, "Are you a Muslim?" He said, "Yes." So she replied, "Can you show me the direction of Najaf?" "Why do you want to go to Najaf?" She said, "I want to go to complain to my grandfather Ali how they killed my father. Ya Jadda, anzur kayfa qatalu abi." Perhaps Imam Sajjad was thinking of when he had no more tents and they were forced to sleep outside with nothing to shelter them. How the widow of her came to bring them some food and water, and Zainab brought the water to Ruqayya. She said, "Please drink, you've been thirsty for so long." Ruqayya didn't know that her wife brought the water, so she asked, "Did my uncle Abbas come back?" "No, Ruqayya, but please drink the water, you're the youngest." Ruqayya said, No, Ali Asghar is the youngest." She took the water bottle and ran towards Ali Asghar's body, crying, "Ya Ali Asghar." Zainab was guarding the camp later that night, and when she noticed that Ruqayya had become missing, Ruqayya couldn't sleep that night. She was thinking about all of the things that happened, and she was wondering where they went off to. Zainab, she walks the battlefield, and she goes to the body of Abbas. "Ya Abbas, have you seen Ruqayya?" She then proceeds towards the headless body of her brother, where she finds Ruqayya asleep, hugging the chest of her father Hussein. Maybe Imam Sajjad, maybe he was recalling when on the journey, when Ruqayya got lost. Ruqayya got lost again, and they threatened to beat him to death if she didn't return. Zainab looked, and Ruqayya was nowhere to be found. She was nowhere to be seen. She must have fallen off the camel. She asked Shimr to let her go and let her respond, but he responded with the whip. Zainab kept pleading and then finally untied her. He threatened to whip Imam Sajjad to death if she didn't return soon. She ran some distance the way he traveled before, and she saw a lady kissing the cheeks of Ruqayya, wiping the tears as Ruqayya told her everything that happened in Karbala. Zainab thanked her, and the lady replied, "Don't you recognize me as Zainab? It's your mother, Fatima 𝗧𝗏. When the poison had finally taken its course, Imam Bakr proceeded to carry out the rites of his father, and he noticed marks on the knees that were due from the prostration to Allah, and he noticed the marks on his shoulders, which was when he carried food to the poor families. And then he noticed another mark, the mark on the neck of Imam Sajjad, and this was the mark of the iron collar and the chains he was forced to wear. Inna lillahi wa inna alayhi raji'un.